his oak ties with a broadaxe, get somebody to haul them to town, and that would make 90 cents for a dollar. And I have seen them seine minnows, and the kind that we use for fish bait. And they had the best time in the world doing that. I've seen them up on Spavinaw Creek seining minnows, and the women sitting over on the gravel banks dressing those little things. They didn't cut their heads off, but they did take out the intestines and put them in buckets. And the youngsters might be out finding wild birds' nests if they could to get some eggs, and then they would dry those minnows on usually a housetop or a rooftop, metal rooftop if they could. Dry that and salt it. Now, I've seen them when it was, you couldn't tell whether it was minnows or flies working in there. But most of the time they kept it pretty clean, and they ate that. They parched corn. They swelled corn like hominy. They took hickory nuts. They cracked them shell and all, and might have had a little meat in some of it. You don't know. I never could taste it. I've eaten a lot of it, but they would make a ball of that, about the size of a big orange, tie it up in cheesecloth, and dunk that in hominy. Now that gave it the oil and the flavor of the hickory nuts mixed with the hominy, but it always lacked a little something for me because it wasn't salted. And when you salt that, it made pretty good eating.
One moment, please. Mr. Wheeler will continue on side 2. Would you please turn the tape?
They never did go to the trouble of shucking those tails, though. And they would boil them, and they turned a beautiful red color. I called them mud-hole strawberries because they were about the color of a strawberry, and they tasted like a mud hole. Now, those that they shuck, when they take off that outside skin and eat the inside of that tail, it's very much like a shrimp. It is very delicious. But that should be done before they're cooked. Then occasionally I have enjoyed eating a little rattlesnake with some of them. They make nice steaks. They're pretty good eating, really. They taste good. That, in fact, I think is, well, it's
a delicacy.
It's a delicacy. It's next to skunk meat.
And you had that too?
Yes, I ate skunk meat at one time, and as soon as I found out what it was, I just barely made it to the door in time to to leave it with them. But it was really a delicious dark red meat, and I like it very much. Then they picked pawpaws and ate them. They're very full of pepsin. They're good for the stomach, and they're pretty good eating. They got to see, if one of them had a hog, and they all ran out in open range, when he killed it, why, all of his friends came in and they ate that hog at one session. And then maybe the next week another one would butcher a hog. And it's a pretty doggone good way to do it. They were certainly...
that was neighborliness, wasn't it?
That was real neighborly.
Yeah.
And
you think we've lost any of that today?
I don't think so. I don't think the Indians have. Frankly...
They still are very close together.
Yeah. And it's kind of hard to really know whether you're a friend of theirs or not, whether you've made friends with them or not. I remember one time I walked up on a job that they were working on, and an Indian boy was telling a story about a trip he had down to Oklahoma City. Now he went into a certain hotel room. He ain't been there but just a minute. Some old girl, he come in and sit down on my lap. She just have one clothes on. Ah, damn. When I came in, he wouldn't finish the story. But I picked up another one time. Picked him up hauling him from Salisaw towards Stillwell. We rode along the road. He said, it's going to be hard winter this winter, Wheelers. I said, that's so? What makes you think so? Old Indian sign. I said, well, tell me so I'll know about it. He said, well, white men have big wood pile. Then he laughed. He'd gotten me to bite on his joke, and we were pretty good friends after that because I bit on his joke. But don't say they don't have humor. They have lots of humor, and I never was treated nicer than I was among the Indians.
Well, that's
a lot of friends.
That's an interesting commentary on the relationship that you had with the Indians.
Oh.
And with their food habits.
Mm-hmm.
That's most interesting. Can you tell us something about Pawhuska now, about the boom days?
Oh, yes.
The oil play here was tremendous.
Yes, it was. And
about what year was your biggest boom?
Well, now, that I don't know. I remember when it was. I know I was making oil field locations for most of the oil companies. And at that time, Wade Phillips was just starting into the business. Now, his brother had been in the business, but Wade was starting to get on his own. Mm-hmm. And I made all of his locations for him. And then Alan Oliphant came in here. He was a civil engineer, but he was also a good geologist, one of the best. And he came up to see me one day, and he said he had a job if he'd just get an instrument to work with. Said he needed a plane table and an alidade, and he heard that I had one of them and a stadiorod. And I said, yes. He said, well, he'd like to rent it. I said, no, I won't rent it to you, but I'll let you take it and use it as long as you want to. Just take care of it. Guy needs a job that bad, he had no to be paying rent on something like that. Mm-hmm. So he borrowed the things from me, and that's when we got to be good friends. You may not know Alan, but he got to be one of the wealthiest oil men in the state of Oklahoma, in fact, in the United States. Okay. And we were very close personal friends. Fact of the matter is, I introduced him to his wife, and we went to the dances together, and we were good friends. Mm-hmm. And you just met a lot of people like that in those days.
You have here several names that are very familiar. Patrick Hurley?
Yes, I knew Pat Hurley real well. He went with one of my sisters and came up here to speak as the silver-tongued orator from Tulsa. And when I was working in Tulsa, Pat had his apartments there. And if I needed any money, I'd go up and get Pat to cash my checks for me. Mm-hmm. We got to be good friends. We'd go out and eat together, and got to visit each other quite a bit. Mm-hmm. And I knew his old friend Victor Locke, who was later chief of the Choctaws. And but as I say, Pat and I got pretty well acquainted. Mm-hmm. And I think he was not only one of the greatest statesmen this country ever produced. but he, I know, had the most unforgettable mind of anyone I ever saw. I hadn't seen Pat in 35 years, and when I was down in Albuquerque, Pat was down there to run for Senate. He had a son bill that he wanted to get through the Senate, and he couldn't do it unless he was a senator, so he went down there and ran for senator from New Mexico. He was campaigning down at Roswell. I went in late one night, and the hotel hadn't closed its dining room doors yet, but I got in time to get something to eat, and I hadn't been there very long until Pat Hurley and his wife came in and ordered their dinner. Well, when I had finished eating, I got up and went over to the table, and I said, Pat, you probably don't remember me, but he said, oh, why, sure I do. You're Eugene Wheeler. How's Miss Adeline? How's Miss Elsie? And how's your dad and your mother? He called them all by name and knew me by name. I hadn't seen him in 35 years. Well, now, I had changed a lot. He was still very dignified looking, and you'd know him anyplace. But he could do anyone that way that he'd ever met and talked to.
That's a wonderful help when a person can do that. And you also knew Mr. Skelly?
I knew Bill Skelly, and
well, now, were these people that lived here or interested in the oil? Or?
Bill Skelly was an oil man, and I did some experimental work for him, trying to use some of the refuse oil, making a chemical asphalt, and he furnished the material for me, and we got to be quite good friends. And as I said, I was a very poor football player, but Jim Thorpe came in here and played football with our town team when and I got to be pretty well acquainted with him because I played on it too. And
Jim Thorpe?
Yes. And we had
what kind of a teammate was Jim?
Oh, he was a horse, believe me. Boy, when he hit you, you stayed hit. He tore me to pieces, showing me how to play my position. He'd get off and hit me, and boy, my teeth would rattle. But we had
good team spirit, really.
Oh yes, we had several prominent men on there from Carlisle, mostly Indian teams, Indian men, and we had a.
I didn't know he had played here.
Well, he played 1 year here, I know. But then I got to know quite a few of our prominent Oklahoma people. Grant Foreman was a good friend of mine.
Yes.
And naturally Joe Matthews, another historian who's a friend of mine. And our own Maybelle Kennedy. I've known ever since she moved to Pawhuska. In fact, before she moved to Pawhuska.
Does she still operate the ranch that her husband had?
No, I don't think so. And
they still have the bank?
Yes. And I went with her sister. In fact, her sister was the first sweetheart I ever had. She probably didn't know it because I lacked the intestinal fortitude to tell her, but I certainly admired her from
afar.
from afar, and she was the first girl I ever had a date with. But it was kind of hard when you drive a town herd, to get up before school and go and collect 40 head of cattle and drive them out to a pasture and then go out after school and pick them up and bring them home. You don't have much time to fool around.
That's right. I believe you said that you'd collided with clotheslines.
Yes. Yes, I had them run under clotheslines with me, and I think the most memorable thing that I had there was one time I was out on a hill right up south of town on the other side of the Bird Creek Bridge. A little trail leads right straight up the hill there, full of brush. I got just about the top of the hill one evening riding a little roan mare, and it began to hail. Hailstones about the size of a good-sized pear, and one of them hit this little filly right between the ears. She got bit in her teeth, and she started for town. She ran down through the brush. She also ran through the fence when she got to it. When we passed the cotton gin, the tornado hit and lifted the cotton gin up and set it about 4 feet off of its foundation. But it jumped me, and the little filly ran on to the barn. When I saw she was going in the barn, I knew there wasn't room for the two of us to go in that door together. Well, I bailed off out in the mud in the lot, and I made a plow out of my nose in that muddy, gravelly lot. But
the people who were in charge of the government here in Pawhuska, has your city had any big, say, feuds or disagreements or anything like that?
Or
has it been relatively?
I think it's been relatively peaceful.
You do have disagreements, I'm sure.
Oh, yes. Anybody's going to have a few disagreements, but we weren't like most of the towns. This is, I think, one of the most friendly towns in the United States. That's one reason I wanted to come back here when I retired. They don't have any more beautiful scenery any place than the Osage Hills, and they don't have any more delightful people or friendlier people than they have here in the Osage. They're wonderful. Yeah, I can
see why you'd want to come back.
Well,
now tell me about this Angus herd.
Well,
when did we get into that?
When I retired 17 years ago.
Your first retirement?
Yes, and bought that place, so naturally I had to have something to do. And I'd been interested in cattle all my life. The fact of the matter is, I drove a herd of cows from Pawhuska up to 4 acres where Dad was ranching one time, to all the open pastures with a few thousand steers following me, and I didn't know whether I'd get out or not. But anyway, I've been around them all my life. Well, I wanted to have some cattle, so I chose the Aberdeen Angus as the type I wanted because I didn't have to fool with horns. They're relatively free of the black leg, and they don't have near the troubles that you have with some of the other breeds of cattle. And running a one-man operation, I wanted something that's easy to handle. And I had heard that they were kind of wild and hard to manage, but if I got a hold of one that was like that, I got rid of it real fast. Mine were good enough that anybody could walk up to them and pet them most any time. Of course, I kind of babied them a little bit. And I have a drawer full of ribbons that I've won, and a lot of nice memories that go with them, but I wasn't married to any of them. When the doctor told me I had to quit feeding, and I might not be able to throw another flake of hay over there and live, why, I thought I'd better quit, so I sold them. And I was very happy that the boy that got them is very proud of them now. To begin with, he didn't like the calves I had. He said, you just don't need to register them. But last month, he called up and he said, say, that's the best bunch of calves, and I want to register them. Everybody wants to buy them. And he says, I won everything at the county fair and the city fair, and I'm going to take them to the state fair. So he's enjoying them and having fun with them, and he seems a nice boy. So
that's quite a herd.
Well, I belong to Herd Improvement Records, and we keep records on the cows, their production, and their weaning weight and their yearling weight, and percentage of meat that they dress out, and how much fat there is from it grade choice.
Lots of books and all that, isn't
oh,
it?
yes, of course, our ambition.
You do upgrade, though, by
Oh, yes.
information.
My ambition was to get steers that would weigh 1,000 pounds as yearlings, that would dress out 60 to 65%, the meat would grade choice with less than a half-inch of fat covering.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I never quite made it. I got 996 pound average. Of course, that means some of them went over 1,100 pounds. And I did make the grading, and I did make the cutout. But I had good cattle. In fact, more than half of my herd were in the top 10% in the United States. The International Grand Champion cow scored 94% of the perfect Angus. I had cows in the pasture close that scored 92, and they were really nice. It was fun to get them. I was trying to build up a herd for my son. I'm sorry I had to dispose of him before he could come home and take care of them.
Where is your son now?
He's up in Springfield, Illinois. He's the industrial engineer there for Sangamon County, the city of Springfield, and the Chamber of Commerce. It's his job to bring new industry into that area and to help those industries that are in there with their enterprises. And he's apparently doing a pretty good job of it.
That's fine.
Yes.
Where did you meet your wife, and where were you married?
We met right here in Pawhuska. She was, I believe, a sophomore when I graduated, and we started going together soon after I had graduated, and several years before we got married, we went together for a long time.
But what was her name?
Lillian Reese.
Spell that.
R-E-E-S.
Reese, the one you
Now,
spoke of.
her stepfather was John Tillman, who was Mr. Democrat of Oklahoma, who was one of the most prominent criminal attorneys in the whole country.
And that was her?
That was her stepfather. And I remember one time being up there playing bridge when a stranger came in, stood between the dining room door and the archway between there and the living room where we were playing bridge.
At her home?
At her home. We looked up and saw him, and John asked, "What do you want?" He's, "Well, if they catch these boys that held up the post office last night and killed that man, well, I want you to defend them." And John says, "Well, I'm a criminal attorney, but there was no sense to that killing. It was a useless killing. The man they killed was a good friend of mine and a good police officer, and I won't defend him." And the fellow says, "Well, take this and defend me if they ever catch me." He threw down a roll of bills about as big around as my wrist and walked out. I said, "Who the devil was that?" He said, "That was Al Spencer. Didn't you know him?" But
you didn't defend him, no.
No.
I guess you did have yours with as much wealth and oil and so on here. I suppose you did have your outlaws too, didn't you?
Oh, yes, we had them, but I don't think some of them were as bad as they were painted. After all, I have stayed at Bill Hale's house a number of times, and I never could quite believe that he killed those Osages over there to get their money. Maybe he did, but he was certainly a gentleman around me, and I enjoyed visiting in his home, and I stayed with him many times. Same for Henry Grammer. We were good friends.
What was he accused of?
Oh, he had harboring criminals, mostly the underground from Chicago. The thugs there that'd come down here and hide out till the heat turned off, and then go back. And in the meantime, why, he had a car theft ring that was working over the state here that was doing pretty good. I didn't know it, but I found it out later.
In the meantime, he was living.
Yes, the life of a rancher, good citizen, and a good fellow.
All these people were just
Well, man,
yes.
yes. But as far as I knew, he was a gentleman and a scholar. He always treated me fine. And we had other outlaws that some that I've known, and similarly, we had many very fine people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, really good people.
Yeah.
And they were, I'll say, far in excess of the bad. Oh, we had dirty politics in the state. Every territory after it has come into statehood has had dirty politics and crooked politics. We had ours. And I've been through some of that, but I'd rather not.
I guess
Every growing community has it.
has had some of the wrong kind.
Yes, and we've had our share. I mentioned a while ago that I had driven this herd of cows through the open pastures up to 4 acres. Well, about halfway up there, an old Model T came rattling down the trail across the prairie. They had more guns than they had men, I think. And they wanted to know if I'd seen anybody out this way. I said, no, I haven't. What are you looking for? Well, the man just held up the Burbank bank over there, and we're after him. I said, I haven't seen him. I guess it was 10 years later. Now, they knew who it was. 10 years later, I was out in New Mexico deer hunting, and, well, I'll admit I had a little camp meat hung up before season started, you know. And went up there to get a hind quarter one morning, and the game warden steps out, says, I thought you'd be here. And I looked at him real good, and I said, well, I'll swear you're Shorty Hieronymus. I said, did you ever square up with that robbing that bank over at Burbank? He said, now listen, if you'll keep your mouth shut, I won't say a word. If you need any more deer, get it. So I kept my mouth shut.
You were fortunate that you had the man that threw you something down.
Oh, we had a few like that, you know,
yeah.
but they weren't too bad.
Is your wife living? And
oh, yes.
And your family has your son? Did you have other children?
No, just the one. My wife was paralyzed when he was born.
Oh.
And it was 10 years before she got over that. In fact, it was 10 years before I could call him my son. The doctors owned him up till then. I never got my bills paid till 10 years. But he's been with it. And so
the boy evidently outgrew it because you said
well, she was the one that was paralyzed, not he.
Oh.
Now, her right leg is much smaller than the left.
Uh-huh.
you should see her down here tonight at the Historical Society meeting. Why, you might notice, it won't be hard to tell. That one leg's smaller than the other one. But she's been instrumental in forming the Osage Historical Museum. And
I admire these people that don't let their limitations be in their way and go right on anyhow.
oh, well, she doesn't even limp. That's
wonderful.
She's still going strong.
Yeah, that's good.
Teaches us bridge down at the senior citizens, and has a ceramics class out at the house. And,
and what are your interests now?
My interests, doing as little as I can, fishing and hunting. I built 5 ponds. The largest 6.5 acres. You might call it a lake, and have that pretty well stocked. And I have a mile of Clear Creek flows through my place, and I have lots of fishing and squirrels. I saw 2 deer out in the garden last week, and it's
kind of a game preserve.
It's really nice. I don't allow deer hunting out there, no. And
this interview is a part of the Oklahoma Historical Society's oral history program, Living Legends Collection. This interview was originally conducted on October the 1st, 1975. The interview was conducted by Mrs. Mary B. Roberts. The interviewee is Mr. Eugene L. Wheeler, that's capital Wheeler, of Pawhuska, Oklahoma. This interview was recopied on the 28th of April, 1989, for inclusion in the permanent collections of the Oral History Program by Judith Mitchner.
This is Mary B. Roberts of the Living Legends of the Oklahoma Historical Society, and offices are at Oklahoma Christian College. Today, I am in Pawhuska. This is October 1st, 1975, and the gentleman that I am interviewing is Mr. Eugene Wheeler, Wheeler, Eugene Wheeler. He is a Pawhuska gentleman. He lives at Route 1, Box 113, Pawhuska, zip code 74056. Mr. Wheeler is a retired surveyor, a civil engineer. He's an appraiser, and until very recently, he was a breeder of registered Angus cattle. And he tells me that he sold out because of his health. And we're fortunate to have him today to tell us some of the early happenings and early things of Pawhuska. Mr. Wheeler, we would like to know something of your parentage, your mother, your father. I believe you listed here your almost a UN background.
Yes, my father was Oscar F. Wheeler. He was a Scotch, Irish, Dutch, and Welsh descent, and was the youngest son of a large family who had rather large holdings up in the southern part of Kansas. My mother was a daughter of Eugene Regner and Emma Regner. Did you ever square up with that robbing that bank over at Burbank? He said, now listen, if you'll keep your mouth shut, I won't say a word. If you need any more, dear, get it. So I kept my mouth shut.
You were fortunate that you had the man to do you something wrong.
Oh, we had a few like that, you know, but they weren't too bad.
Is your wife living? And
oh, yes.
And your family has Your son? Did you have other children?
No, just the one. My wife was paralyzed when he was born,
Oh.
and it was 10 years before she got over that. In fact, it was 10 years before I could call him my son. The doctors owned him up till then. I never got my bills paid till 10 years. But he's been with it. And so we've...
The boy evidently outgrew it because he
Well, she was the one that was paralyzed, not he.
Oh.
Now, her right leg is much smaller than the left. If you should see her down here tonight at the Historical Society meeting, why, you might notice, it won't be hard to tell. That one leg's smaller than the other one. But she's been instrumental in forming the Osage Historical Museum. And
I admire these people that don't let their limitations be in their way and go right on anyhow.
oh, well, she doesn't even limp. That's
wonderful.
She's still going strong.
Yeah, that's good.
Teaches us bridge down at the senior citizens, and has a ceramics class out at the house. And
and what are your interests now?
My interests, doing as little as I can, fishing and hunting.
Really?
I've built 5 ponds. The largest 6.5 acres. You might call it a lake, and have that pretty well stocked. And I have a mile of Clear Creek flows through my place, and I have lots of fishing and squirrels. I saw 2 deer out in the garden last week, and it's
kind of a game preserve.
And lots of quail. I don't shoot squirrels or rabbits. I do allow some my friends to shoot quail. Mr. Hughes of Tulsa, who's the founder of the Farmers and Merchants Bank there, formerly ran the Tulsa Stone Company. I've known him for 25 or 30 years. Well, Ed comes up and hunts with me, and Dr. Rendell over at Pawhuska is my doctor, and he comes over and brings his friends, and they hunt. And I don't hunt. In fact, I don't need to. They usually give me enough birds. But
well, it sounds like a good life.
I hunt and fish, and right now my wife ran into a wasp nest here a month or so ago and got stung out of all proportion and was very allergic to them. While she was still dizzy, she got up at night and went to the bathroom and fell in the tub and smashed a vertebra, so she's wearing a brace now. Has another 3 weeks to go on that before she can do everything she wants to.
Accidents around the home, they say, is the worst place.
But we have a nice garden and a nice place, and
sounds like a wonderful life.
Play bridge. Now, for instance, this afternoon was our bridge club. I call it our Geritol Bridge Club. They're all a bunch of geriatrics. Harry Roberts and Ossie Farrell and Vernon Dahl, all of them retired old men. Well, we played out there from 2 until 4:30. We play at one house or the other every Wednesday afternoon and serve dessert. And that, and then I still, I had hay planted and hay mowed. I've sold hay and mowed the pastures at tame pastures, and so I'm still, I don't have any cows, or I'll sell hay, and I'm pasturing some cows for other people and some horses. I've had 6 horses out there, and they give me something to keep me interested.
Yes.
Yeah,
Well, is there anything else? You mentioned a while ago something about teaching a chemistry class that you were more or less conscripted into.
Yes,
would you like to tell us that story before we...
Well, several years ago during the Depression, I had lost my job with the State Highway Department. I won't go into the reasons or why for us. But
during the Depression, there
were
many things.
This was because I wouldn't collect donations for one of the politicians, which I'd rather not go into. But I was home here, and the principal of schools called me up and said, Gene, you've had a class going on over here since 8 o'clock. I said, what the dickens are you talking about? He said, well, Ross Kendall had to, his father got ill, and he had to go and stay with his father. And we want you to come over and take his class. We've canvassed the whole town, and you're the only one we know of that is qualified to teach his classes. That's chemistry and science and biology and 1 study hall period. We want you to take over. It won't last but a couple of 3 weeks, but I want you to do it. Well, I hadn't been in the classroom for 35 years, but I said I would, and the class started early. It was going on, supposed to be, when I got over here, and I went into the room, and I was met by a cute little old girl there. She knew me better than I did her, but I'd known her ever since she was a baby, but I just hadn't seen her in a long time. It was April Abbott, and April says, Mr. Wheeler, are you going to be our substitute teacher? I said, yes, I guess I am. Well, I'm April Abbott. You remember me? I said, oh, yes. She says, well, you know, Mr. Wheeler, we're on example 17. And do you add the water or the acid first? Well, naturally, I didn't know what example 17 was. I'd hardly set my foot in the door. I hadn't looked at the book. I didn't know what she was talking about, really. And I said, wait a minute, hold up here. I guess I'm in the wrong class. I thought this was chemistry 2. I didn't know I was taking over a beginner's class. Well, she said, oh, yes, I remember now. But, you know, she was just like we were when we were growing up. We all tried to see what we could get away with the new substitute teacher. And you've seen them, and you've probably done it, sitting there and write a note and swing your hand back and forth. Pretty soon let a note fly back there. Well, I think I took off about 20 years my age for the time I was out here in that school class, because I found out that the kids today are not a great deal different from what they were when I was a boy. Now, there are exceptions. I won't go into that. But
well, do you think that our education now is as basic?
No.
Are we getting the basic principles?
I don't think so. No, and I have seen many examples of it. Boys who are coming out of the university.
The teachers are paid so much better now.
Yes.
And so far as their paperwork is concerned, their degrees are...
Yes, but they are not teaching the basics as thoroughly as they should. Some of the new ways of teaching I don't think are getting the ideas across. I know when I was an engineer for the highway department, I had many of the Oklahoma A&M boys sent down to me to try out and see if we wanted to put them on permanently. I had many of the boys from OU come down there. In fact, some of their instructors now were some who came down to me to get some practical experience and see whether or not they should go ahead with it. And I found out so many of them lacked the basic training that they should have. And their principles, their living or their moral standings were not as high, we'll say, as they should.
In what is acceptable for conduct today and in the past. Very definitely there's a change there.
A decided change. Now, I've had a number of young boys here who were interested in 4-H come out, and I've sold them club calves at a ridiculously low price to help them get started, and some of them I've sold them real herds, 10 or 15 head on credit, and let them pay it out as their calves matured to help them get started. And there were boys that I've watched them graduate from the schools here, and to see their writing and to hear their speech has been rather alarming, to put it mildly. I've wondered how in the devil they got through high school. And I still wonder. I don't know. It's been...
In the general sense, do you feel then that education has advanced, or are we going to have to rectify some of these?
Oh, I think we have a lot of things to correct.
We do?
Yes.
And the teachers' union?
I think the teachers' union is one of the things we're going to have to correct. Frankly, they helped me out when they voted a 5-cent tax on cigarettes to pay the teachers. Well, I quit smoking because I wasn't going to help support the teachers that would go on a strike after they have signed contracts to teach school. I think that's a darn poor way to teach our children. If they have a contract, they've signed and agreed to teach school for that year for so much money, I don't think they ought to strike and deprive the other children of an education to do it. I think they better do it off season anyway. And
then more money doesn't necessarily mean a more thorough education.
No, well, you can take right here what they've said, that our classes here, our teaching was not up to the standard of the United States, and we had to bring our teaching up to the standards. Well, raising the salary doesn't bring the teaching up to standard. It's the teachers themselves that has to be brought up to standard. If our salary won't attract the teachers, then how does it come that here a couple of years ago we had a lot more teachers than we had use for? We had an oversupply of them wanting jobs. No, I think the teachers need if they're going to holler for more, then they better put out a little more.
Well, when you and I were teaching, it probably was then, it was considered a profession where we were dedicated to it.
Yes. Oh, well, as far as that's concerned, I married a school teacher. My wife was a school teacher. And I have lots of friends who are school teachers. And we've had teachers stay at our house many years here. But I'm talking about teachers in general. I'm not talking about any specifics. I'm just talking about things that I know.
Well, there's one other question. Since you've had this background of the and knowledge of the oil and the oil business and so on, what do you think now? How's going to be the best way to conserve our resources? What do you think we can do?
Well, I do believe that curtailing the speed limit, setting it where it is about the most economical way we can conserve that. I think we're going to have to do a little more riding together, and we're going to have to cut out a lot of vacations, take them closer home, and I know that we're going to have a lot of development to do in the way of new oil discoveries. The question is a little bit, if I knew the answer, I think I'd be smarter than anyone in our Congress. I don't know the answer to it, but I do know that...
I was glad to get your opinion, though, because you've had a background with so many of the really big oil men that began their development in this field, the ones that we have discussed already. And I was just anxious to get your conclusion from it.
Yes, I remember old Doc Sam Kennedy so well. You know, he discovered Section 8 down here. Well, Doc had been an old doctor. He'd ridden horseback and carried his satchel horseback and taken care of patients in Osage and Tulsa counties. And he borrowed money to drill wells, and he got dry holes, and he finally borrowed all he could, and he drilled a well out on Section 8 out there. The night that well was supposed to come in, he sat there with a 6-shooter, 45 laying on the desk in front of him, and a bottle of whiskey. And he said, if that comes in a good well, I'm going to drink this quart of whiskey without stopping. And if it comes in a dry hole I can never pay out, I'll just kill myself. Well, they called him up about 2 o'clock to tell him that he'd hit a gusher out here. It was Section 8 down here on Hominy Creek. And he was sober enough after drinking that whiskey that he sold his oil lease for $8 million. And that's when he put in the Tulsa Country Club and built that Kennedy building there in Tulsa. In fact, I staked him out for him and supervised the construction. But he paid...
Well, those are interesting stories. I wish we had time for more.
He paid my way in the Old Timers Club down at Tulsa for 20 years.
Oh, really?
We were good, close friends.
Mm-hmm. Well, this has been a most interesting interview. I wish we could have gotten to you sooner.
I've enjoyed it.
If we come back for seconds, will you help us again?
Yes, I haven't said I think enough, though it was of historical value.
I'm going to put my fishing pole and my little worm in one of those ponds that you told me about.
You just come out any time you want to.
Thank
you.
And
I'll tell you now, I have a kind of a fish out there that's illegal in the state of Oklahoma. I didn't know it till after I put them in there. They are the white amur, A-M-U-R.
Amur.
They're imported here from Siberia and northern Manchuria. They're fish that the Chinese have cultivated for more than 500 years.
What are they like?
Trout or they are a moss-eating fish, a vegetarian. They do not eat the other fish. And they have cleaned my legs of moss. I don't have any moss. I can drag a fish out of there now, so come on out.
Why are they illegal?
Huh?
Why are they illegal?
Because the state of Oklahoma, in fact, the United States, has had some rather bad experiences with things that they have imported. You take the English sparrow, the piranha, the flesh-eating fish, the walking catfish, and a number of things that have been imported have been pretty bad. Well, these haven't been proved in this country yet. Now, Arkansas is making a study of them. They've had them over there for 7 years. And
And the name
I
is,
got some of them before I knew I couldn't bring them in here. I had
Oh.
them in. Well, I wrote them and told them, so they know I've got them. But they're in a controlled pond. They can't get out.
I'm
And
going to see one of those one of these days.
and they do not breed here. They gain at the rate of about 10 pounds a year. Fish that I put in there 2 years ago now weigh around 20 pounds.
My.
And they
Well, that's a regular meat supply.
it's very high in protein, and it rates a tie in the Gourmet Association with the Gulf red snapper as being one of the best eating fishes in the United States or in the world.
Yeah.
So if you come out and catch one of those, we'll eat it right
And
there
I'm
on the
catching.
farm.
I don't know, but we'll try it.
I'm afraid I'm either going to have to bait with alfalfa, or I'm going to have to seine them. I don't know how I'm going to get them out of
And
there.
then the little worm I was going to put on won't do any good then.
I don't know. I gave 6 to one of my neighbors up there that was bothered with moss, and they caught one 2 weeks ago on a worm.
Really? They're taking
So
up other habits
they
then.
might eat a worm.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, this has been a most interesting interview.
Oh,
I don't know why we've been so slow getting to you. I'm sorry. But maybe if you're in our way, maybe we can complete this and get the rest of it. I'm sure you have some more.
Maybe
And-
if you come out my way, you make it a point to call us up.
Thank you so much, Mr. Wheeler.
We'd love
Uh,
to meet you.
This is Mary B. Roberts signing off an interview with Mr. Eugene Wheeler at Pawhuska, October 1st, 1975. Thank you.